Hello, and welcome to Financial Insider Weekly. I'm your host, Michael Gray, CPA. My guest today is an attorney, Frank Doyle, and it's Wealth Plan.
Wealth plan.
There you go.
There is still wealth to plan in Silicon Valley, believe it or not.
Yay! Anyway, Wealth Plan is a law firm specializing in estate planning, estate and trust administration, and estate and trust litigation. And Frank has been practicing law for about 30 years?
Over
30 years?
Over 30 years.
Darn. It's certified by the California State Bar as a specialist in taxation law and probate, estate planning, and trust law. So welcome, Frank, and thanks again for being with me here today.
Well, thank you for having me, Michael.
Okay. So today we're going to be talking about estate planning in an uncertain environment. And before we get started, I've put a little caution out here for our viewers. And that is that we're only covering a few highlights of an enormous area of the tax law and also the legal rules that are involved for estate planning. This is just a bare starting point to learn some issues, and we want people to get qualified tax and legal advice. And our discussion is going to focus on California law because Frank and I both happen to practice in California, and the rules vary somewhat for other states. So again, you need to check into those differences. So with that, let's get into it. So why is this an especially difficult time for estate planning?
Well, the basic estate tax law at the federal level is in complete chaos. And, we were looking for some finality this first year of the Obama administration, but to date we haven't had it. And so right now I think for most people the estate tax law is pretty favorable. We have $3.5 million per person exemptions. That translates to $7 million between a married couple, but the future of that's uncertain. We think, and President Obama ran on the platform that he would retain a $3.5 million exemption for each person and then have a maximum tax rate of 45%. But the legislation has gotten kind of caught up in the hullabaloo over the health care program, and we really don't know what we're going to end up with. It varies from week to week, as to what appears to be on the horizon. And so that is one of the things that it's difficult, because if the law is not settled, it's hard to properly advise your clients. You have to build in all kinds of, we'll say, hedges into their estate planning documents. So, if this happens, then you get this result. If this other thing happens, then you get this result. So that's why it's difficult.
Yeah. So just to bring our viewers a little bit up to speed, that we're just finishing the era of the Bush tax cuts. And so one of the features of that was that they increased the estate tax exemption from $1 million in stages until now we're at $3.5 million for 2009. In 2010, if there was no change that was made, the estate tax would be repealed for 1 year, the federal estate tax.
For 1 year, and then it comes back with a vengeance.
Yes.
Because then it comes back in 2011 with exemptions of only $1 million per person.
Right, and basically the estate tax would become a pumpkin from Cinderella's coach, and it would go to where it was before the Bush tax cuts were in effect.
Right.
So,
so it's pretty bizarre. I mean, next year was always slated. We'll throw grandma off the train next year because that's the year to die. If you want to do proper estate planning. But all joking aside, I think what we're going to have is what's being proposed now is they're going to extend the $3.5 million for a year. They're going to call it a patch, and then they'll revisit the whole estate tax issue next year, and hopefully we'll get something permanent because that's what the environment where you can plan, where you have laws which are relatively stable and certain.
Yeah. So part of the issue that we're talking about is that in the past we would often have estate tax returns. An estate tax return, though, only had to be prepared once when you passed away.
Right.
And whereas income tax returns we have to do every year. So it doesn't seem like such a problem when we change income tax rules because, okay, well, we have to adapt for this year, but we just do because that's sort of how things work. But when we're talking about estate plans, we don't make a will and a trust every year. So a lot of people don't even have an estate or trust, unfortunately, or a will or trust, I'm sorry.
Right.
But it's not something we do frequently, and it's an expensive process.
Yeah, it's an expensive process, and I think one of the things is I think people like to have relative certainty in their estate plans, and one of the things that we have to do, given the state of the law, is kind of deal with a lot of contingent planning. For example, if we have people who have a $2 million estate today, and husband and wife, well, if the law stays at $3.5 million, they're not going to have any estate tax problem. But if the law goes down to $1 million exemptions, well, then they're going to need some mechanism built into their trust where they can use both of their exemptions. So that's the kind of thing that this uncertainty creates, and that's why it's a difficult time to plan. But you do need to have something in place. I think the key is to you're kind of in an earthquake zone, so you want something that's got some, we'll call it seismic flexibility, so that you can do post-mortem planning to achieve the result depending on what the law is at that particular time.
So post-mortem planning for our viewers is there are some things that we can do to make some adjustments to an estate plan after a death.
Right.
And so we call that post-mortem. Okay. So we're sort of into this area. Why do people who don't have an estate plan already need to go ahead anyway and put something in place?
Well, you always do better if you plan, and even in an environment where people say, "Well, I really don't have an estate tax problem. I only have maybe a few $100,000." You still need to put something in place so that you don't leave things to intestacy and disputes post-mortem. So there's really two key components that every estate plan needs. You have to designate who is going to manage the estate, who's going to be the executor or the successor trustee, and then who's going to receive the benefit of the estate. And there are two key components, and every person has the option to designate who is to manage it and who is to receive the benefit of it. But if they don't call it out, then they leave it to the vagaries of the intestacy law, and that usually leads to a result that's unanticipated. Somebody that really isn't a good manager ends up with the priority to be named administrator in the estate, and then somebody who's really kind of been estranged from the family, but technically is an heir under the intestacy law, gets a portion of the estate. So it's always better to just designate who you want to manage your estate if anything happens to you, and then who do you want to receive the benefit